All right, folks, I want to welcome our guest to the show. It is the alien hunter himself, Derell Sims. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, I am delighted to be here.
I am glad to have you. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a while. So let's get right into it. Let's talk about this UFO thing, this alien thing. I've got tons of questions I have for you tonight, but let's start in the very beginning for some of the people in the audience that may not be familiar with who you are. Can you give us a background on who you are, where you came from, and what brought you to where we are today?
Certainly. My background is uh, first from a investigative point of view. My background is senior military police officer, 95B40 in the United States Army. I volunteered during the Army during the period of 1968 through 1971, and was sheep dipped. That means I was taken out of the Army and placed inside the Central Intelligence Agency. They dip out of the sheep what they want for themselves. Basically, you're the sheep. I mean, everybody tries to make you think you're something special or unique or whatever, but you may be in some sense of the word for them, but you're still sheep for them as well. I mean, you never lose sight of that. So that gave me a strong investigative background as a military police officer, and serving overseas as well as in country, and then working in the Central Intelligence Agency in covert operations. During my time in the CIA, I began to learn some of the tradecraft for spying. I was not a spy per se. That wasn't my particular position there. I was a martial arts instructor and weapons instructor with my primary duties there. But then I got out of the service and continued my investigations in the UFO field. I continued my investigations in the military and in the CIA both, but I never told people about it because that was not the place to be exploiting my abilities at the time. But I did have cases during those times as well, abduction and other cases. But how I actually got into the military, into the UFO phenomena, so to speak, I was a captive audience. At age 4, I noticed something strange in my room. I sat up in my bed to realize somebody's in the room, and it's not my parents. He's about 4.5, 5 foot tall, I guess. Hard to say when you're a little tiny guy, 4 years old. And the amazing thing about the whole story is the fact it was similar to an alien abduction that you might see or hear about. The difference was he was walking away from me, and I thought he's going to bump into the wall. I didn't realize he had brought me back through the wall and was now leaving through it. So as I thought that he was going to bump into the wall, I heard a voice in my head for the first time saying, "It's awake." And I realized he's talking to me and he's not using his mouth. How can I hear him in my head? So this was stunning to me. The two things that were really profound about that is going to be real important to your audience, in my view, as an investigator, and you as an investigator, and is simply that the alien, the looks of the alien were stunning to me. When he got close and I could see his large black eyes that were perfectly round, not the Hollywood version of the elliptical form of eyes you see in the movies, but they were perfectly round. Back in the 40s and 50s, some of them still had, that model was still available, so to speak. And I'll talk about that later if you so are inclined. But in my view, these 7 primary aliens that people talk about in the UFO phenomena, after 50 years of research, I've determined a lot about them. I mean, a lot, from their IQ to their some of their agenda stuff as well. But the bottom line is what I saw as a child, and children see things differently than adults. What I noticed when he turned and walked toward me is his eyes were stunning because they're perfectly round and black, 1.5 inches across each. No mouth except for a slit, and no ears, and a tiny little couple of holes for a nose. None of it made any sense. As kids, like I said, kids notice different than adults. An adult might say, "Oh my gosh, an alien from another world or something. I didn't think that at all. I kept looking from his neck on down, and I noticed he didn't have any mammary glands. He didn't have a belly button, and he didn't have a TT. And I couldn't figure that out. Why was he so different than us? You know, I have all these components and parts, and he doesn't. So I couldn't figure that out at all. Long story short, in the encounter, he tried to give me a screen memory, which the screen memory for your audience is, it's a false memory syndrome that's given by the alien to an abductee or a contactee to make them buy into a false narrative that's going on. In other words, we're here from Zeta Reticuli to save the planet, fix the ozone hole, and do all these wonderful things for mankind, none of which they've done, and none of which it doesn't look like they're going to do. So I'm waiting for that magical moment to happen, and it never happened. So he gave me a screen memory, tried to change my perception of him into a clown. And many abductees have phobias to clowns and don't know why, because they bought into the clown phobia. Well, I didn't. I kept shaking my little head back and forth. No, no, no. And in the process of that, and this is what's important for your audience, in the process of that, however it happened, when he switched me off, so to speak, they do that so that they can control you and so that you won't remember what happened. I popped back in, so to speak. I don't know how I did it, but I did. And I later learned to do that over and over in other abduction accounts. Now, the importance of that is this. When you pop yourself back on without them knowing it, you're listening to them think and talk. They're talking at that time. It'd be like you as a police officer listening to Mickey Cohen and his gang talking big stuff. You're over there, they think in a trance, and you're listening to every word they say every time they talk, and you just don't let them know. So that's kind of important because you get to learn a lot more about the alien and what they're really up to, as opposed to what they are doing to you and trying to convince you that they're doing, which is a totally different story, in my view.
Well, you mentioned other experiences. Obviously, that wasn't the only time this happened to you. Did that continue through your childhood and young adulthood? Can you go into some of those other abduction encounters that you had with these things?
Certainly, Brian. The next one, next big one that happened was we moved from Midland, Texas. My first event happened at I think it was 10,005 South K Street, and then the second big one occurred in Mayhill, New Mexico. My father was a Baptist minister, and he was moved there, and we were building a parsonage, a building, basically a home outside the church for us to live in. And we were living in the basement of the church during the time. And at the time, before the parsonage was built, we had an outhouse. A lot of people may not know what that is, but in the Western movies where the cowboys go out to the bathroom outside, the little tiny 3x3 room, that's what we had. So it's kind of funny. And I went out to the bathroom that night, and as I shut the door, I was stunned because there was the same, what I call a cosmic skinhead, still looking at me. He's looking at me again. So this is my third major time of seeing him, and I call him the cosmic pizza delivery guy. He delivers the pizza, and we're the pizza, so to speak. So he took me, and what I remember from the account was an encounter with a praying mantis-like being. That was on a Friday night. On a Saturday morning, I went out to play, which was out in Mayhill, New Mexico. I promise you, this is not a metaphor. It's a wide place in the road. That's all it is. It's a little tiny town, and I'm in the middle of nowhere in the mountains. So I went out to play in the field next to the house, and I did something I couldn't understand why I was doing it, because I love animals. I love insects. We've rescued more animals than you can imagine. We rescued a Bengal tiger out of an apartment complex in Houston, Texas, as an example. We've rescued lots of animals. So hurting animals is not, or insects is not in my purview. So, but I was there that morning catching grasshoppers, pulling the heads off of them. And I've realized that there were about 100 dead grasshoppers laying there. And I realized, well, why am I doing this? So I caught one of the grasshoppers alive and put his face next to mine, looked at his head real close, and I realized, oh no, that's the wrong head. What I was looking for was the praying mantis. So that was the guy that got me the night before. 7-foot tall praying mantis.
I definitely want to get into the different types of these aliens that you mentioned earlier, but I know you had other experiences after that, and I've heard you talk about it before that it sort of ended violently. Can you go into detail about how those unfolded and what happened during your last few encounters with these things?
All my encounters, I had approximately 10 encounters from age of 4 in 2000, excuse me, in 1952 to 19, it was 13 years, 65, I guess. So during that 13-year period, I had numerous events, just about one a year, realistically. One of them, I had a gun. I was out hunting and saw one of the alien had abducted me while I had a gun, by the way. And as he was walking away, I remember I keep talking about popping myself back on, turning myself on. Well, in that case, I was out in the desert hunting, and I noticed my head was starting to get very hot. And the reason is because you're standing in the sun in one single place. And as I switch myself back on, I'm holding my little 22 rifle with 17 rounds in it, and the alien is walking away from me. He just brought me back and going to leave me in the desert. I'm not supposed to remember anything. Well, of course, at this point, I look at him and I've said, what in the world? And at that point, he heard every word I said in my head. And he turned, and it's the only time I've ever seen an alien have emotion on his face. He thought I was going to shoot him because I had 17 rounds in that 22 rifle, and I could have shot him easily 17 times because he was about 50 feet away from me, and I've shot animals much further away than that with a 22 rifle. So I didn't shoot him. I started to chase him, to run after him, and he ran and through the bushes and so on in the desert, and I lost him. So after a while, I got to thinking, well, this doesn't make any sense. The guy's, he was here, now he's gone. I didn't realize they beamed him out, so to speak. I thought maybe he went underground in a special little hidden place or something. I looked for places, and I got thinking, well, you know, you have to be honest about this. Could I have imagined all this? That's possible. So I went back to where I was at, retraced my steps, and I realized that I didn't imagine any of it because there were two sets of prints out there in the sand dunes. One was mine, and one was the guy I was chasing. So anyway, long story short, that was another event. That was different than all the other events because people have tried to interpret my case for me and to make me understand what they think I don't know, which is kind of amusing to me because they're usually caught up with the 7 types of alien: the little gray, the tall gray, the reptile, the Nordic human being one, the praying mantis one, the Bigfoot, and so on. All these entities are made, hatched, cloned, and manufactured, in my opinion, and based on the best evidence that I have, by someone else for the purpose of making us think that these are aliens from another world. It doesn't mean that there aren't aliens out there from other worlds. I'm not negating that. What I'm telling people is the guys that we're looking at right here, they're not them. We're looking at something totally different. Because if you get rid of I use 7 hats in my investigations, and as a police officer, you would understand this. You have a UFO hat, everybody does, or a Bigfoot hat, or whatever they have that they study with. But you and I come from a different background, so we also have a cop hat. That cop hat doesn't believe anything. You got to prove it. It doesn't matter what your story. It's just a story until there's evidence, and that's what the cop hat does. That's the second hat I have. I have an intelligence hat, a medical hat, a scientific hat. I've done 27 surgical interventions for alien implants around the world. Last couple of cases, one was in India and the other case was in Houston. My point is that I've got 7 different hats, and those 7 hats give me 7 opportunities to see the phenomena with 14 sets of eyes, basically. And some of the hats don't even agree with each other, which is fine with me because it gives me a better view of what I'm looking at. So the hats basically have looked at the phenomena and seen that these 7 characters that show up as the quote unquote alien from Zeta Reticuli, from Mars, or wherever you want to think they're from, we have a pretty good idea where they're actually at on Earth and in space, based on some very good stuff from NASA and other places. But the bottom line is that these particular guys are made, hatched, and cloned and manufactured by the guys in my last event. The 5 entities that showed up in my last event were not the alien. In fact, they weren't aliens, period. And I've never described them but to anyone. And I've I've had, you have no idea, I've met tens of thousands of people in the UFO community over the years, and speak usually go on a world tour every year, with the exception of COVID. I'll be going again this August to start my European tour. But the bottom line is simply that these entities that showed up in the last event were not the alien. They're ones who are responsible for making, hatching, cloning, or manufacturing these entities to fool us to believe that those particular people are entities that are from other worlds, and they're not. The DNA of every one of them comes from right here on planet Earth. Every one of them. If you're careful enough just to examine the evidence, you have to put on a medical hat or a cop hat, maybe both, to come to that conclusion. But most people only have a hat, like a UFO hat. Why, I have a UFO hat too. It's a lot of fun to wear. Only problem is it's been fooled a bunch of times. People lie. People make up stories. There's a guy out there called me the other day, said, "What do you think of Dr. Reed?" And I said, "I investigated his case when he first came out 25 years ago. He was a fraud then, he still is. First of all, he's not a medical doctor. He tells everybody that. And he killed the alien, and the alien was going to eat his dog. Aliens don't eat dogs." I said, "What's wrong with you? You're wearing your UFO hat again. You're believing everything people tell you as if it were the truth, and it just isn't." So anyway, the fun thing is I ask people who often tell me, I know I've had the exact same experience as you, Derrel. I know exactly what you're talking about. I said, "Okay, describe them for me. Tell me all about them." "Oh, they sit a long big white table, and they have long white hair, and blah, 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 and so on." I said, "You've been watching too many Star Trek movies. You couldn't guess and be close. You don't know what you're talking about. Whatever you think you know, you don't. It's just that simple." So now the good news is, it's good for me, bad for them. I've met 8 people so far that met one of the 5 that showed up in my last event. 8 people. Their lives have been wrecked as a result of it. When that being shows up in your event, you can just forget the UFO business. You don't have a clue about what's going on at that point. And it's just, so I've never described them, never given any information about them, except that I'll let people know that they're the ones that are responsible for making, hatching, cloning, or manufacturing these entities. They want us to believe they're aliens. Doesn't mean there aren't aliens out there somewhere. I'm not saying that. I'm saying these 7 guys, they're not them. We've been hoodwinked.
Well, that might negate my next question because I guess the thing that always comes to mind, and I've interviewed contactees, and I certainly want to get into the difference in contactees and abductees because you talk to different people and they have different experiences with these things, and they get a little pissed off if you go down the road where
Yes.
I've been and pushed people about, I'm a cop and or used to be a police officer, and if somebody's taken out of their bed or taken out of their car or taken out of their home forcibly against their own will, that is an abduction. I don't care. That's that. I'm just cut and dry like that. But I know there's different things, and we'll certainly get into that. So I guess my next question for you that would go along with this, and I've asked other people this in the past that have had contact or had abduction scenarios, and it always comes down to why them? Is it lineage? Is it a different type of situation? Is it DNA? Are they looking for something specific in these people? A lot of times I've talked about when I went down the rabbit hole, if you look at other people in the family, past generations have had abduction scenarios. What have you been able to find as far as why this is happening to certain people like yourself? Why did it happen to you?
Once a cop, always a cop. Once a military guy, always military. It never changes. And I love your cop hat. I love the way it's clear. I love the way it cuts through the bull and goes right for the story. There's nothing wrong. It doesn't. You're not negating someone's story. You're not hurting them. You're not offending them. If they accept offense, it's only because they don't understand the procedure. It's that simple. Nothing wrong with inquiring. Inquiring minds want to know. So we have put together some stats since the 1980s. And like I said, I'm older than dirt. I've been around for a long time. I've done this for over 50 years. And a lot of people can't believe that, but I have. And our work isn't secretive, but it is private. A lot of the people that we work with don't want to be known. I got one that's got a remarkable case last night. Said, I don't want anybody to know anything. I said, well, I'm going to give you a hint. I said, your story, as interesting as it is not remarkable in the sense of the word. It's unique. It's unique because it happened to you. It's not unique because I can give you 5 other stories very similar to it. So just because your name's not ever going to be used and you don't want your information out there, I said you should, because the information you're asking me for, I got from tens of thousands of other people who wanted to help other people, and you're not doing that. So I have a bias against you for that purpose. I mean, I'll honor your request and not give any of your information out in any way, sense of the word. But you're asking for everybody else to help you understand your stuff with all of their stuff, but you're not going to tell anybody anything about yours, so it might help them. I said, you're really shooting yourself in the foot here doing that. But we can play that game if you want to. Anyway, one of the first stats we came up with is we found 45% of our people are Native American, Indian, Irish, Celtic, Scottish, period. Now, my Turk friends came to me when I was in Turkey 22 years ago, and they said, Mr. Sims, your presentation, wonderful. We heard Bud Hopkins, we heard Stan Friedman, we heard John Mack, and all these wonderful people. Wonderful. We loved your presentation. Fantastic. But you have one big mistake. I said, what's that? Your statistics are wrong. I said, well, correct me here. I need correction. If it's wrong, I need to know that. We're not Native American. I said, I didn't say you were. I said 45% of the people taken are Native American, Indian, Irish, or Celtic, Scottish. Well, we're not. I said, then you're the 55% that aren't. That's what I have news for you. You still are. But we're not. I said, okay. 2 years later, a scientist from the capital of Turkey, Ankara, came to the United States with a brilliant idea. I don't know if he heard it from me at that presentation or what. But anyway, he came to the United States, took DNA samples of Native American tribes, took the DNA back to Ankara, to the laboratories, and then did DNA samples of various ethnic groups in Turkey. And guess what they found out? They're Native American just like we are. And the Turks wrote me back and said, oh my God, Mr. Sims, you're right. This is amazing. I said, I told you I was correct. I said, my stats are correct. It's science. It's not an arguable fact. The only thing you can argue about is your ignorance. You got a UFO hat or a Turk hat on. Your Turk hat doesn't want to see anything except if it ain't got the word Turk on it, it's wrong. I said, well, you're wrong. And now you know it. Then they brought Native American tribes over, had the biggest powwow you ever saw in Europe, right there in Turkey, because they were so happy to find out they're Native American as well. I said, well, let me help you out here. I didn't tell you this before, but I will now. So I told my Turk friends, I said, a long, long time ago, your people lived in teepees, just like you see the Plains Indians, even with the little W squiggly around the top of it. I said, you don't even know that about your own people. I said, you want to have a lot of fun with Americans? I said, go to Google and Google the word sequoia. And sequoia, you'll see an Indian guy, a painting of himself, which he authorized. And you'll see him with a little pipe sticking out of his mouth. And next to it, he has a little chart with a Cherokee Sibbolus. This Sibbolus is basically, it's the Cherokee alphabet. He designed that himself. It's really amazing. He developed the first drawing of sounds or words for the Cherokee people. So this is really cool. I mean, wow. But the most interesting thing isn't that. Look at his head, and you will see what looks like a Turk turban on it. I said, just thought you might want to know. That's when I say you're Native American, Indian, Irish, I mean it, because you are. And now the DNA proves it. Oh, I'm happy for you. I'm glad you're all excited. But you need to, when you're doing UFO work, take your Turk hat off. It's getting in your way. That's the first statistic, Native American. The second thing we found is that a lot of these contact events were familial. They occur in the same family, not to everyone in the family, usually to only one or two people at most in the family. If it's not in your immediate family, go ask your mom, dad, your grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles privately. Ask them, tell them your event, and ask them if they knew anything about it. If you see their face change to shock, you got one. They may or may not tell you, but you can tell by their physiology. Your physiology is 55% of your entire communication. I don't care if they say a word, they just sit there shocked. 38% is your tone, pitch, and timbre of voice. Only 7% is the words. So why is it I don't have to hear all the words of everybody? I look for the other 93% of communication, because that's going to give me more information, particularly if you're lying or if you don't know the truth. I can still pick it up.
Yeah, those interrogation classes that I took as a cop just ruined me from having regular conversations with people, because I'm constantly looking for those nonverbal cues and things that you pick up in people's, and it really comes in handy now that I'm in this line of work and I interview tons of people with particularly Bigfoot, but other encounters like this one we're talking about here. So I know the lineage and the familial thing plays a part in all of this. But one thing that has stuck out to me too, and I'll probably be all over the place because there's tons of stuff I want to talk to you about that
Sure.
we probably won't be able to get to, but it's other things like cattle mutilations and even people being mutilated in these events. And I'll be honest, that's one of those things that really hasn't made a whole lot of sense to me in connection with the alien thing, right? And I've seen that it was prevalent back in the 70s and 80s and 90s. You know, I was born in the 70s and I grew up in the 80s. So I got to see some of that stuff on television in the 90s. And it was one of those things that I just scratched my head about, and I do today. And I know you've worked on some of that stuff. Can you talk a little bit about cattle mutilations and people mutilations and how common both of those things are? Are they still happening today at a lower rate or a higher rate than back then? But if you would, just talk a little bit about those two things.
I love that cop hat. It gets down to the point and goes for the throat. The answer is yes, it's still occurring, still happening. Human mutilations are much rarer than animal mutilations. But the fact is, let me go to a little story that will help your audience immensely here, and will make a lot of things clear concerning mutilations. I met a Fife, Alabama cop named Ted Oliphant years ago, and we were I was going to a conference in San Francisco, and he was meeting me there. He said, "I want to talk to you," and I said, "Good, I'd love to meet with you." And when we met for dinner, he offered to buy me a big steak dinner. And of course, anytime somebody like a good cop invites you to dinner, it doesn't take long to figure out you're on the menu. And I was. And I took the first bite of that steak. He looked at me and laughed and said, "It really is true about abductees, isn't it?" I said, "About what?" And he said, "The amount of salt they need." I said, "The salt intake is huge." He said, "I can't believe the amount of salt you're putting on that steak. That's not good for you." I said, "But I love it. I could eat as much as I could get." And he laughed. He said, "Weird. That is so strange." He said, and he looked at me, and then I realized why I was there. He said, "What do you know about cattle mutilations?" I said, "Well, good night, Ted." I said, "You're the expert. Why would you, why do you ask me stuff like that?" I said, "You're the man." And he looked at me, never, I love that cop hat, never phased him. "What do you know about cattle mutilations?" Well, I said, "I've done a lot of reading, but that kind of doesn't mean anything because you have to be in a lot of field investigations." He said, "What do you know about cattle mutilations?" And I realized, like I said, I was on the menu. And I said, "Okay." I said, "You've got 4 different kinds." He said, "What do you mean?" I said, "The first one, they do." "Who's they?" I said, "The ones up there coming down here to do it. The alien, the one we call the alien. They're responsible for a number of the mutilations. The second group is the group that you think is doing all of it." And he said, "Who's that?" And I said, "The intelligence community." And he says, "I think they're doing all of it." And I said, "Well, you're wrong." And he said, "Well, we'll see about that." And I said, "Hey, you got a case? We'll see." And I said, "The third group are people who are just, uh, they're a much, much smaller group, very small." And I said, "They are people who, for all intents and purposes, worship these beings. They think that if they mutilate something in like manner, that they will notice that we are like unto you, and lo and behold, come and pick us up because we get it. None of these people do. You're picking up the wrong people." In other words, they believe they are the chosen ones. They are the ones. If the aliens abduct them, then it it'll all be perfect. I said, "That's a small group." And an even smaller group, I said, which is just as evil as they come. He said, "What's that?" And the fourth group are people who mutilate animals. They're just mean. They're just mean as the devil, and they do horrific stuff. And I said, "Now, the FBI is trying to make all the mutilations look like Satanist." I said, "I assure you that is not the case. The vast majority of them are the alien. The second vast majority of them are the intelligence community." I said, "But here's the kicker." I said, "All 4 of them have 4 distinct separate signatures." And I said, "If you understand that, and you're working a cattle mutilation as an example, you'll see the differences very quickly." So I said, the thing I want to get across to you, and that's when now Ted and I are buddies. You got to understand we're friends, and but he's a tough cop. I mean, he Fife, Alabama cop. He's a good one. He says, "Well, I think you're wrong. I think it's not the alien. I think the United States government's, the military is doing it." And I said, "Well, I don't like you saying the military did it because I was military and I would never do anything like that. So I don't like you blaming it on the military. Blame it on the intelligence community because they'll do anything. They have, and they will continue to do it. And there's nothing you're going to do to stop it, basically." And he said, "Well, you're wrong." I said, "No, you're wrong." I said, he said, "You got a case, make it." And I said, "Don't make me embarrass you in front of God and everybody else in this room." And he says, make your case." And I said, "Fair enough." So I described one case that we had that was tons of meat fell out of the air. Tons of meat of all kinds of animals. Some of it was human. hearts, lungs, thinly sliced. Thinly sliced. He said, still doesn't mean it wasn't the military. I said, the case happened in the 1880s. Who in the CIA you think did that? I said, don't tell me my work again. I know what I'm talking about. So that's the general story for the alien phenomena. Excuse me. Now, we had a horse mutilation happen to a dear friend of mine, about 20 miles outside Houston. She got a series of wonderful horses that they're like family to her. And this particular horse was a massive horse, and he he was gone, and nobody knew where he went. And the other horses, they all stayed together, all of them, all the time. They never split up. He was gone, and they later found him beside a fence, lying on the ground with the butt end of him torn apart. The most amazing thing about this particular mutilation case, it's the only case in the history of mutilations ever, came back alive and mutilated, both. And the lady found him. She was horrified, crying and everything. She called the vet, and the vet came, and they were going to put him down with a drug, of course. But she said the weirdest thing about this case, Derrel, that horse never kicked. When an animal's damaged like that, a horse, they tear the ground up all around them, trying to get up and kick, and they do everything. There was no place where he fought or wrestled. It was like he was laid there back in trance. And he came back alive. The only case we've ever had in the history of this stuff where the animal came back mutilated and still alive. We think there was something else to that too. But that gives kind of a history of the animal part of it. Concerning human mutilations, I define mutilation differently than other people. To me, if you're an abductee or a contactee and you come back with a chunk of your skin missing, like we have one abductee on the side of his neck, there's a big chunk of skin that's been cauterized, came back missing. That's mutilation. So I don't care. Just because he's not dead doesn't mean that. It's still mutilated. So to me, a lot of these cases are mutilation cases where one lady comes back with half her labia is missing. That's mutilation. Any way you cut it, that's mutilation. But to get into the specifics, what most people would consider mutilation is when you come back dead. So that case, those kind of cases we do have, such as the Watasponga case, which is quite famous, where a man was found in the water. He had been dead for 5 days, and he was dead in the water. A fisherman found him. None of the fish had predate, or any of the animals had done predation upon the body, so he wasn't attacked by any of the animals after being in the water for 5 days. If you know anything about Brazil, if you're in the water for 5 days, there isn't going to be much of you left, and nothing. So the fisherman pulled him up on the shore, and my friends down in Brazil had the body taken. The police came, of course, and they showed the body to doctors. The doctors did their examination with. It looked just like a horse mutilation. Eyes and the anus cord out, the stomach missing, etc., etc., etc. And then they brought cattle mutilation pictures to the doctors after they had looked at the Watasponga case. And in the Watasponga case, they said, oh my God, it looks just like the cattle mutilation stuff. So that was an interesting way of putting it. The reason that's a famous case. But I could tell you of other cases that you may not know of. Other cases, we have one woman, and as you know, as a police officer, you can tell if people are dead or alive when they were mutilated. In this case, she was alive, and she was skinned completely alive and placed back in her bed. An elderly woman, uh, skinned alive, and placed back in her bed, without a drop of blood in the bed. So, what medical or scientific or great cosmic reason does anybody need to mutilate a woman alive and put her back in her bed, mutilated? I missed the point there totally. So I disagree with my contactee friends when it comes to they have our highest and best good in mind. I just don't believe that for a minute. Then I've got 2 dead children in Dallas, Texas, died in their abduction. The reason they died, they had bruisings and cuts and things on them that were not consistent with any previous injuries. But the problem is the alien, particularly the small alien, the little short guy, the little gray, when he brings you back, sometimes he puts you in the wrong location. He'll put you with your clothes on backwards, inside out. That's why people know something's wrong with his picture. He's got the IQ of about 80. That's a moron. And he makes mistakes. These 2 children were in a wading pool on the front porch of their mom's home. When they came back, the mom came back from her abduction as well, and she can't find the kids. And everybody in the neighborhood's looking for the kids. They find the kids inside a fenced area that they could have never climbed over. These are little kids. And they're over the fenced area in an enclosed swimming pool, little small swimming pool, and they're floating dead in the swimming pool. The reason is you have to understand the way the alien thinks. This guy's got the mind of an IQ of 80. If he picked them up in a pool, he put them back in the pool. It was just the wrong pool, and they drowned in it. And obviously, the case went to court, and the grand jury, believe it or not, believed her story, and they no-billed her. She was not responsible for the boy's death, but I've got the autopsy reports and everything else, and I can tell you and show you beyond a shadow of a doubt that those boys were tortured long before they ever hit that water. And not only that, the mother was taken at the same time in another room. And when I worked with her, she could hear her children screaming in the room. That was not the first time they had been taken. It certainly was the last one.
I want to get into the alien implants. I know that's something that you're very well known for. You've got, I think you said 27 different types of these cases. Can you talk a little bit about when that first came on your radar? And that's one of those things, again, I've talked to contactees and abductees about. I've talked to people who claim to have these implants. And that's something that's really always fascinated me as to what they are and why they're there. So can you talk a little bit about the first time you encountered that and how that has progressed through the years?
I can, and I'd like to, if I may, make a shout out to my a conference I'll be doing in North Carolina, believe it or not, and Encounter Quest, and that's going to be on April the 1st. Actually, on March the 31st, I'll be doing 2 workshops, one on handwriting analysis and one on symbolic profiles, how we figure out things about abductees just from their drawings. And then the next day, on April 1st, a major conference with a bunch of great speakers, probably a lot better than I am, at the alienquest.com. We'll be speaking there with a bunch of other speakers, and it's just going to be a blast. So I want to do that shout out for them. And if you're there or anywhere near there, please come by. I'd love to see you. Now, concerning the alien implants, the reason I knew so much about the alien implants is because in 1960, at age 12, I was abducted again in Alamogordo, New Mexico, where I moved to 1305 Ohio Street. And long story short, in that particular abduction event, what happened was I was taken inside a circular room, which of course I assumed was a UFO, et cetera, et cetera. It looked, everything is real to me. The same thing, the same cosmic skinhead that always got me, took me there. And then there was a taller gray there, which sometimes people refer to as the doctor. Well, he's not. but if there is any cutting done on you, he's going to do it. And again, um, they shut me off so that I would not hear what they were saying. And I, at this time, had learned after numerous accounts how to turn myself back on, and I did without them knowing it. Why is that important? Again, you're listening to them talk about what they do and what they're going to do that they're never, ever going to tell you in person. Now, they may tell you a whopper, like, you're going to be in the school of higher consciousness and we're going to do wonderful things with you. And they may even do stuff like that. The point is, that's not the real reason you're there. That's not the story. So, you're part of the blue light special of the cosmic uh, Walmart in the sky, so to speak. And you're on the table, and in this case, it's me. And at that point, I listened, and they took a needle like device about 8 inches long that had a little silver sphere on the end of it, jammed it up my nasal passage, and broke the bones. And I screamed. It hurt immensely. And the pain went back behind my eye. And that's where I think the object was lodged. When the needle came back out of my nose, there was no silver sphere on it. So I assumed that's what had happened. And then I heard, because you got to understand, I'm still lit. It's like the radio's on and they don't realize it. And I'm listening. And I found out what they were going to do to me. And I broke down and started crying. But I couldn't understand. Well, I never heard anybody in my life. Why would they do that to a little boy like me? And this will be of use to your audience as well. So that's how I got my first alien implant. Later, I looked with X-rays and things for an implant, and I never found one. But a guy called me and he emailed me on the internet and said, "I heard your story on this program," and I was amazed because I had the same exact experience in 1960 that you did. And I thought, of course, he's probably making it up. He's just a wannabe that's, I want to be just like Derrel, so everybody will believe my story too. So I said, "Good. You got any X-rays?" He said, "I do." I said, "Send them to me." He did. He's got the implant, the little silver sphere, exactly in the exact place where mine would have been. And it's the same time, 1960. I like to fell over. I wasn't the only one, and that was important to know. You're not the only one. Now, for your audience, it's important for me to tell them right up front. I'll make some enemies out of this. I get it, because they still got their UFO hat on. Alien implants are pretty much rare. Everybody that sees a UFO, that sees an alien, or gets abducted thinks, "Oh my God, they chipped me." Not likely. I look at hundreds of abductee X-rays every year, and I do not find hundreds of implants there. I do find some objects that are interesting, but are not implants. People can't believe that objects can be in your body and not be an alien implant. That's just the way it is. But anyway, I calculated last night. I was going through all my notes and I stopped at 70 because it was about 2 a.m. of alien implant cases I had. But it's a lot more than that. But again, you have to understand, I meet tens of thousands of people over the years, and I've got 2,000 live cases right now. So that's a huge amount of people for me to go through. And you would think they're all implanted or chipped or whatever you want to call it. They're not. Vast majority of them are not. However, I will say this: if you've seen an alien, if you've seen a UFO, you've been close to one, an alien or a UFO, you've already been programmed. I don't care whether you got an implant or not. And it's highly unlikely that you do. But if you do, you can contact me. I'll be glad to look at your X-rays or tell you how to get X-rays and do this. I'm happy to do that. I mean, if you got something, I want to know about it. I get it. But my point to you is the following. If you've had contact, I don't care whether your abductee contacted you or just saw it, it's likely you've already been programmed. The easiest way to think about that is imagine the alien downloading an app in you. And you know how you would download an app in a computer? Well, they just did it to you. Well, I don't know about that. Well, write me and we'll talk about it. You'll probably find out that you've got a program running, but that's not an alien implant. It isn't. That's not the same thing. But most people will consider it the same thing. One of the apps that we have within us, and you see this all the time. And if you've got a cop hat, you know this makes you so mad you want to just choke them. One of the apps they love to install in people, contactees, abductees, doesn't make any difference. You destroy, hide, or ignore your own evidence. If you've had contact with an alien or been on a UFO, it's likely there's evidence on you, near you, or inside you. But that, again, you have to know what to look for. That's the reason I wrote the book on implants and another book on how to find evidence, because I wanted people to follow in my shoe steps, and so they could literally find their own evidence. You don't need me. You can do that by yourself. It's a little difficult whenever you don't understand what the alien's plan is out there. So you kind of taking some big leaps out there, which are nonsensical if you can do something better and so on. But the alien implants are the best way I can describe the implant, the ones that are real, is first of all, this will kind of stun your audience. Some of them are metallic, some of them are ferrous, some of them are non-ferrous, means a magnet won't pick them up. Some of them are plastic-like material. Some of them are biological. Some of them are, it just gets weirder and weirder. An ocular implant that we got that fell out of a lady's eye after a mass abduction with 8 witnesses, by the way. That implant fell out of her eye, and we think it housed a biological camera. It is a ceramic-like material outside and a cushion-like material on the inside. Some implant material we found from one abductee camping in the Area 51 area. He went off in the middle of the night, came back limping, and his friend said, "Dude, why are you limping?" "I don't know." "Where'd you go?" "I don't know." "What happened?" "I don't know." That's your third group of you got abductees and contactees, and then you got a third group of people, or people who simply literally don't know what happened. And they're not even sure it did happen, because they really don't have any memory of it at all. So you have to get with somebody that understands memory recovery. And every hypnotist thinks that they're experts in this. That is just not the truth. But, whatever. As I always tell people, I said, how come you never let anybody work on you? And I said, hey, I work on your brain. You don't work on mine. That's the way it works here.
You kind of already answered the question, I think, in a roundabout way. But one of the things I had jotted down to talk to you about was I've seen a UFO. When I was 16, my mom and I had an experience where we saw one from fairly close, probably 500-600 feet away. And I was having a conversation with, I think it was Preston Dennett that I had on the show a while back. And I'm talking and telling some of my experiences. And Preston's like, you are fitting the bill here you're checking some of the boxes for a possible contactee. I'm like, well, okay, maybe. But I guess the long question is, are there people walking around out there who may have no idea that they've been abducted or been taken aboard a ship, or they're contactees, however you want to put it? Are there people out there walking around and they have no clue that they've been a part of this phenomenon?
I love your cop hat. You cut to the chase. You get right to the point. Go for the throat. It's perfect. Lady came to one of our conferences in Sedona, and she said, Mr. Sims, I took your evaluation, and 30 3 out of 36 points of being a possible abductee or contactee, I fit. I said, okay. She said, I think it's a bunch of hogwash. I said, okay. She said, that doesn't bother you? No. I said, because if you are, I can't make you not an abductee. If you're not, I can't make you not I can't make you anything. And I don't care whether you are or not. It's not up to me to make anybody anything. And 2 years later, she meets me with another engineer friend of mine, and they meet me and one member of my staff, Pat Gray, in Arizona, in Phoenix. And she said, "You remember how rude I was to you before?" I said, "Well, I sure do." And she says, "I'd kind of like to look into this." So I know there's nothing there. I said, "Sweetie, if nothing is there, nothing's going to be there. It's that simple." She said, "Okay." And I began to work with her, and she sat there and absolutely stunned. At age 5 years old, she was taken, the alien grabbed her little arm, walked her inside a craft, and on the right hand, right inside the entryway, in a room onto the right. You ready for this? She's watching a cattle being mutilated alive by the Greys. It's bellowing, screaming as they walk by. It never bothers them in the least that she sees that. And she goes on. I worked with her for about an hour and a half, and finally I brought her out, and she looked at me and she cried like a baby. She said, "I know those events are real." And I said, "That's up to you to decide. It's not up to me to decide. You decide whatever you want. I can't make you anything." And she said, "I got to know the rest." And so we went in for another session, about another hour. We finished, and she was freaking completely out. And she said, "How can that be?" I said, "There's three kinds of people. One are called, I call them the honeybees. Honeybees are sweet, kind people who believe the aliens are here to save the planet, fix the ozone hole, or do some wonderful thing for mankind, upgrade your DNA, whatever. They haven't done that, and it doesn't look like they're going to get down to it here real soon. They just haven't fixed the world or done any great thing yet." Those are called the honeybees. They're called contactees. Whenever they get a screen memory, they're in a school of higher consciousness or whatever the whopper is they're told. They believe it hook, line, and sinker. And it doesn't matter whether it's a lie or not, they still like it. And they're like honeybees to me because uh, a honeybee, if you've ever robbed honey from beehives or from a bee tree, and I have, this is the way it works. If you rob the honey correctly, the bees actually won't fight you. They won't come and attack you. A few might, but most of them won't. Once they smell their own honey, they'll go and eat it. And most of them will not be angry. My point is that contactees are like that. They don't realize the funny little man in the funny little hat, funny little white suit is not your friend. He's stealing everything you've got. And you need to know what it is he's actually after. The honey is a metaphor. He's after something else, and you don't even know what it is. And you think it's the honey. That's number one. The second group of people are abductees. These are taken, abduction is a crime, always has been, always will be. And somebody steals your kid out of your room, that's crime. And the cases I've worked of kidnapping, people never come. I have abductees always coming to me saying, "Mr. Sims, you just don't understand. They're taking you or your son, your child, for his best and highest good." And I said, let me put it to you in a different way. I said, if you take my child, anybody takes my child in the middle of the night, I'll hunt you down. I don't care what planet you think you're from. It doesn't matter to me. Now you're into messing with the kids. You can mess with me. I'm big. I can take care of it. I'll figure it out. I'll investigate it. Children don't get to. They get manipulated. And that's how that stuff all begins. That's what contacteeism is all about. It started in childhood, and they program you as much. Don't unload these apps on you, so that's as soon as you see them, you just, oh my God, wonderful! You're here to help me some more, and then the program goes on. But anyway, the second group I called the killer bees. They're not like honeybees. They do make honey and they do protect themselves. But the difference is, if you get into a hive of killer bees and try to steal their honey, do you have any idea what's going to happen to you? You're going to wish you'd never seen a killer bee ever, because they'll come after you. They will not let up. They will not stop. And unless you get to a place of safety, they will keep stinging over and over and over, and they're going to get you. So they're going to make you pay a price for stealing their honey, because for them, they kind of get it, and you're not going to get this one for free. Go get your contactees, get their honey, but this one you're not going to get. And the third group is like this engineer friend of mine that they don't have a clue. They don't have any memory. They don't have a clue. And the fact is, if you've seen a UFO, been near a UFO, or seen something, and even if you never remembered it, doesn't matter. You've already been programmed, as this lady had. And of course, as I worked with those programs activated, and you could see them as a person in memory recovery using NLP, advanced NLP techniques I developed in hypnotherapy and other techniques as well. Some conscious, some unconscious, doesn't matter to me. The only important thing is getting your information to you and in a way that's usable for you. But I tell people from day one the following. In a case in point, true hand of God, true story. Guy came to me on the internet. It says, Mr. Sims, he says, I believe I was taken at age 9 or whatever. And I said, okay, what am I supposed to do about that? Well, I said, do you want me to validate it? And I said, I don't know what I can do to validate it for you. He said, well, I need to know. And I said, was anybody else there in your event? And he said, well, my mother, I think knows about it, but she never talked to me. I said, have you ever talked to her about it? And he said, yeah. I said, well, I'm going to tell you two things. Number one, go ask your mother if you really want to know. And two, I said, you realize this is like Pandora's box. You're going to open something here you can't close. Now, you like most people are going to think, I'm smart, I'm brave, I can do anything, I get it, I'll understand. Yeah, you might. But the fact is, you're never going to get that box closed again. Don't think you will, because you won't. So he goes to his mother, said, Mom, I had these weird events when I was little, and I remember being brought back, and I remember you even being there. And she said, well, it's true, they did take you. She said, but they always brought you back. He calls me and says, what am I going to do now? And I said, I told you not to open the box. What am I going to do now? What do you figure it out yourself? What do you think you're going to do now? You've opened the box to something that now is come a long, long, long way, wherever it is you think they've come from, another dimension, a zeta reticuli, wherever it is you think they came from. They came here with an agenda, and what you have is what they want, and they haven't figured out how to get it yet. But I assure you, it's not your DNA. That's the least of their interest.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, so I'm going to reserve one last question, and I would be remiss if we didn't talk at least something. It's been in the news. These objects are being shot down over the United States and allegedly in China, and unless that's some kind of false flag, which I believe it may be, but that's my opinion. Let's talk a little bit about those things that have happened just over the last couple of weeks. I mean, literally in the middle of the Super Bowl, we've got the Secretary of Defense doing a press conference talking about these things. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's your opinion on that? What do you think that is? And talk a little bit about what you believe to be disclosure, because that seems to be the big buzzword in the UFO community, at least from the people I've talked to recently, is all about this disclosure and the Tic Tac UFO videos and those kind of things. Can you talk a little bit about those recent incidents and a little bit about your opinion on disclosure from our government?
Certainly. First of all, I don't think there is going to be a disclosure in any sense of the word like people are imagining. The government's not going to come on TV and say, "We found a flying saucer at Roswell." Not going to happen. They made that mistake once, one time. They're not going to make that mistake twice. They, however, will tell you things that you already know and already know about, or can read about or study about, and come forward and say, "We don't know what it is, but it's amazing." What have they told you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. You haven't learned a thing. The reason is because, look, I argued this point with Nick Pope at one time at a conference. He said, "Disclosure is immediate. It'll happen soon." I said, "No, it's not going to happen." I said, "Nick," I said, um, "I'm not here to defend or attack your position in the MOD, but I know where I was and who I was and what I did in the Central Intelligence Agency, and you don't know what you're talking about. It's that simple." I said, "What do you think the intelligence community is all about?" I'll give you a hint. You paid us to hide secrets from your enemies. You paid us to hide secrets from you so our enemies couldn't get them from you. Then later you gave us huge, massive budgets that you don't even know what it's spent on anymore, about secrets you're never going to know about, ever. You hired us to lie to you. What makes you think that we're not doing it now? I said, "Nick," I said, "we have been waiting for 50 years for you and your congressional committee to show up and say, 'Hey, CIA, NSA, you better tell us the whole story.' You're not going to get anything except another, you ready for this? The same thing the alien does, cover story. Screen memory, if you like. And we've got some really good ones ready for you. In fact, they're so good, you're going to believe them just like you did the weather balloon. It worked the last time. Why not this time? But this weather balloon's a lot better than the one before. It's got real UFOs with it. You're not going to get the truth is just a lie that hadn't been told yet. And if you if you think the intelligence community is going to blur all this stuff out and hand it to you, you're living on the wrong planet. It's not going to happen. Do you know that NSA is 8 times the size of the Central Intelligence Agency? Why do you suppose that is? Because they're gathering intelligence on every level that you can imagine. And the Chinese are worse than they are. And they're probably better at it. At some point, all that information is going to be used for something at some point. A false flag or whatever they choose. to address, first of all, your question, they shot down a balloon that was spying on us. That is true. Absolutely. It was Chinese. Yes, 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 yes. I could not believe how stupid whoever gave the command, this president or whomever, how stupid that was. All you had to do is capture the balloon, and you could have shot a tiny hole in it, and it would have sank slowly and not destroyed all the equipment. Why would you want to shoot it into water so the salt water could damage a lot of the information? Most of that information was not on it anyway. It's already been transmitted somewhere else. Dumb. Then the Biden's boys finally realized we're behind the 8 ball here. We should have shot that down over Aleutian Islands. That was dumb. Well, at least we shot it. Um, so they send their jets up to look for anything in the sky at that point that looks like a balloon and just shoot it down. They shot down a hobby outfits balloon. A $12 balloon. I couldn't believe this. Uh, Dumb as a bag of hammers. Now they're shooting down all kinds of a $400,000 Sidewinder missile to shoot down a $12 balloon so we can look like we're doing the right thing. Why do I think somebody in Washington doesn't have their head screwed on right? You're just covering your tail at that point. Now, there were other stories, and I don't know if they're true because I wasn't there, of a Tic Tac type object that was shot down. I saw the picture of it. If it is real, and I don't know that it is, and I find it dubious to believe that it was real, but if it was real, there's no question it was human technology. You can see the tech. It was human, whatever that thing was, if they shot it down. But there was another story of a Tic Tac that went from Alaska, laterally the north. The story was it went from the North Pole to South Pole in a few seconds. I don't think they shot that one down at all. You don't have a Sidewinder fast enough to do that. So the last thing I'll say about that is false flags. Is it possible? Of course it's possible. When JFK was the president and we had the Cuban Missile Crisis, the Central Intelligence Agency came to JFK and said, there's another way we could do this. He said, what's that? He said, these people are Roman Catholic. We could project an image of Mary in the sky. They will think that came from heaven. And they'll get rid of the communist. Of course, JFK is Catholic. So what do you think he's thought of that idea? No, and no. So, but the point is they could do that back then. The false flag idea is a very real possibility. Will there ever be a false flag? I think there probably will. We will do it. The Chinese will do it. The Russians will do it. Or any combination of those three to get done what they want to do. And so my answer to people everywhere is the following. This thing, I don't care what you think about it, it's not just nuts and bolts. It's much more than that. Some of the stuff's interdimensional, some of it's spiritual. There's no question about it. Anybody think that's not true? You don't know anything about the intelligence community. They've done things you could scarcely imagine to try to contact the alien at various levels, including using demonism. Why would they do that? Well, because it was somewhat successful. That's why. My point is that there's a spiritual aspect of this people are missing. The 5 beings that came into my room the night of my last abduction were not aliens. They were part and parcel to those who hatched, cloned, made, or manufactured. There is a great warfare that's going on between here and heaven. And a third of those guys didn't do well. And they're part of our problem right now, in my opinion. And people don't have to believe any of this. In 10 years, we'll see who you're praying to take care of your problems. It won't be the alien. So from my viewpoint, I think we need to look at this with all our hats. One of my hats is a spiritual hat. It looks at everything spiritual. I mean, all of it. Everything. Doesn't ignore any of it. Because it's just information to me. The question is, what do you do with the information? Knowledge is not power. How it's used can be powerful.
Very wise words. You mentioned Encounter Quest. I will actually be there in Hamlet, and so I will see you at Encounter Quest. I will link to that. I'll link to that in the show notes. Talk about your books. You mentioned your books. Where's the best place for people to get your books and buy those from you?
If you want to go to get those, the books are not written as entertainment. If you want to be entertained, go buy somebody else's stuff. These books are designed to put you on your quest to find evidence, whether physical evidence or, like I said, if you've been around an alien or a UFO, there's evidence on, in, or around you. It's just that simple. The book Alien Hunter tells you how to find it. The book on implants tells you a lot about implants, what to look for, and so on and so on. One of my favorite chapters, I got to say this, is my co-writer with it. She said, Derrel, we need a zinger for the title for this chapter. And I said, well, okay. You want a really good zinger? And she said, yeah. And I said, ask the question right at the beginning. Do aliens have implants? She says, oh my God. Do they? I said, sweetie, they are implants. They're made, hatched, cloned, and constructed to do certain tasks. And you are their task. That's the way it works. So you can go to thealienhunter.com and all the pictures, videos, all kinds of fun stuff is there to look at and to see. I have a video that is remarkable because it's got a picture of an alien sitting in the back seat of one of my abductees' car. They abducted him. Well, how'd you get the picture? The city of Los Angeles took a picture of him running a red light. The city of Los Angeles, the police, gave my abductee the picture and wanted a $350 fine, but they didn't recognize and see there was an alien sitting in the back seat. And it's on the film. They're the ones that took the picture, not me or him. So that's where you find me. Just go to thealienhunter.com and a lot of fun stuff there to see, play with.
Awesome. I will link to that in the show notes. You guys go over and check it out. Derrel Sims, it's been an honor and a pleasure to have you on the show, sir. I've had a blast talking to you.
We'll see you in North Carolina.